This week, grain and beans will soon be a memory out in the field. Chisel plowing. Can you do it yet or not? Also, stories of near UFO abduction from both Dave and I. Also in the second half, field lunches, gravity boxes, and long johns, and how they all came together at harvest. I'm Grant Nelson. This is the Rural Reflections Podcast. Welcome to another Rural Reflections Podcast. Dave Nelson's in Carrington, North Dakota. I'm Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. Good morning, Dave, and welcome to the weekend.
Well, thank you. It's my first day of the weekend. Pretty much worked all day yesterday. The soybeans are coming off, or were coming off like mad yesterday, and so we worked until about 4 o'clock, and so it's nice to have one day off, I think.
Well, we're getting soybeans piled outside, and the mountains are getting bigger and bigger. Grain, that's a long ago memory now. There's been nothing going on as far in the wheat field for probably, I'd say, it must be a week and a half or maybe even 2 weeks. Everybody went out there and just hammered it done quick.
Yeah, it's going fast here. I'm beginning to wonder what I'm going to be doing in a couple of weeks because harvest here will be... soybean harvest will be over next week pretty much everywhere around here if they can keep going. And the little bit of corn that's left, there's guys already taking corn off, and it's at 18%, the ones that have been doing it. So it's not like it's already crossed a couple thresholds for corn moisture.
Yeah. Well, around here, we've seen some silage corn get taken off. Not that there's a whole lot of silage corn, but that's been taken off. We're seeing beans come off real good now. That's been going on since early last week. And we're already seeing people out there with the chisel plows and cultivators.
Yeah, there was some of that after the wheat was done here, but pretty much no chance for any more field work right now. It's so hard and dry. But hopefully we can get some rain. We'd love an inch or so of rain and then go do some field work.
Well, you always say Carrington's kind of like the center point between dryland farming and regular crop farming, isn't it?
Well, and I just looked at the Bismarck. Their moisture this year, 4.87 inches. We're 6.16 here, which is light for both places, but that kind of gives you an idea what the difference is.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Fargo is, 13, 14, 15 inches. I don't know.
Yep.
So it kind of shows, even though it's lower than normal, it still shows that difference.
Well, like last fall, now I'm on Pennington SWCD board, so I always pay attention to how much rainfall we get in our rainfall gauges. And I believed for 2019, we had almost 22 inches of rain total up here. And of course, that caused untold chaos and usage of tracks and people taking corn the following spring. I mean, it really caused a lot of trouble, but you can see that the lack of rain, particularly at a time when you want to go out and chisel plow, that can cause a lot of problems too, because you can't get out there and you can't dig it up, and if you do, you get to change shovels about every couple fields.
Yeah, I know. It's I would rather have it a little wet than dry, but it's just so. Last year was such an extreme. I mean, we had, I don't even know how much rain we had, but we had up to 9 inches in one event, last fall that got all this mess started. And so, our rains this summer, if we could have spread them out and, made them each an inch, we'd still have, fairly good topsoil conditions. Our subsoil moisture is plentiful yet because we had so much rain last year. But, it's it's never quite what you want.
No, that's the truth. Now, I want to change topics just a little bit. I don't want to get out of the field. I want to stay in the field, but I've got a story I've been waiting to tell you for, well, I have never told anybody this story other than Lisa. I think we got enough time in the first half of the show here to do it. About 7-8 years ago, I guess, I was out just working in the pasture and I was fixing a little fence. Now, of course, I'm not a person who believes in UFOs or ghosts or any of that stuff. And I'm sitting there, and it's out in a beautiful summer day. I mean, it's nice and bright outside. And I look across the field, and I see a little white flag bobbing across the field. And first I thought, I bet that's a plastic bag that's getting blown around, but there wasn't that much wind, so it couldn't have been that. And I see this little flag bobbing around, and it's getting closer to me. And I thought, oh, no, I'm going to be one of those people who gets abducted now, or they're going to find me with, I don't know, parts missing or something. And I can see this thing bobbing along. I'm like, oh, what is going on? I've heard about this kind of thing. I never believed it. Now it's going to happen to me. Well, the closer it gets to me, I realize it's a little gal from the Minnesota Wheat Growers Association. She's on this tiny motorbike. I mean, it's tiny. And she's got a flag on it, I imagine, so she can find it when she's walking in the field. But what she's doing is she's flagging fields. And she finally drives up and gets close to the fence. And I started laughing, and I look at her, wave at her, and she stops, and we talk for a while. I told her what I thought was going on. And she laughed pretty good. But to tell you how small this little motorbike was, she was putting it in the back of the pickup by herself. So, of course, to do that, she was backing down the ditch, so it wasn't so much of a lift. And later on in the day, she had done that and gone too far, got hung up on the culvert when she was doing it. So I ended up backing up to her and pulling out my unidentified flying friend from wherever, from Red Lake Falls, I guess is where she was from. But I pulled her out of the ditch. But that was the weirdest thing I've ever had happen, I mean, certainly in the last decade.
Yeah, I know. I had a few experiences like that too. I'll never forget when we had gotten that Caspic farm.
Yep.
We plowed all night long, and I was out there. It was about 3:00 in the morning, and this glow started showing up in the west. And of course, at that time, UFO things were just hot. You know, everybody was talking about it, and we'd had lots of sightings of different things and so on. And this glow just kept getting brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I was going to be taken over by something too, I thought. And then all of a sudden, I shut the tractor off, and I didn't know what I was going to do. Pretty soon I could hear the train whistle blow. And, you know, 3:00 in the morning, I'd never been by there when a train came by, so I know how that goes.
That's pretty good. Let's take a quick break. We'll do my online column. In the next segment, field lunches and gravity boxes. I'm Grant Nelson. This is the Rural Reflections Podcast. I'm Grant Nelson. This is Rural Reflections. Now, some time ago, Lisa and I participated in a little question and answer session like the Newlywed Game. Lisa was asked a series of questions about me, which she answered. I was then asked the same questions and answered them. These were questions about my personal preferences, and Lisa answered them all correctly, which was rather good. I answered them all correctly except one, which was a little surprising, especially since it was my personal preferences. When asked the question, "What's your favorite color?" I guessed incorrectly, however, did not realize until I was told the correct answer from Lisa's answer list. It was red. Perhaps I'm not self-aware. Maybe Lisa just knows me better than I know myself. No matter. Red is my favorite color. Now, I'm not sure what it is about the color red. However, it just feels energetic, comforting, and solid all at the same time. The easy answer would be my allegiance to International Harvester Farmall tractors. I cannot think of any situation where red enjoys such a prominent display than on the thousands of Farmall, International Harvester, and Case IH tractors and implements. I think my trust in the color red probably comes from years of work with old Farmall tractors. My dad used them too, and he was a solid person, so maybe there's a connection with it in all that relationship. Now, I turned to the internet to understand my inclination to the color red. I like the internet. You can just search and search until you find an answer that fits your predetermined preference. I did the internet search, and most of the responses identified a color preference of red as indication that you have passion, fire, drive, are an extrovert, and are emotionally intense. Or maybe you just like fire engines. I decided to go a little deeper into my investigation of the color red and walked to the window. Pretty much every building around our place is red except for the house. When I see a barn red building, it just makes me feel good. I remember the barn back at my parents' dairy farm. We could hold 4,000 small square bales in the haymow, and that really impressed me. My dad had to double some of the 2x10 boards in order to take all that weight. However, it lasted for years. A January evening was warm in the barn. All those bales upstairs made for great insulation. Plus, the cows put out so much heat. Just seeing that barn in my mind makes me feel good. And the first thing I see when I think about the old barn is the color. That'd be red. I guess the greatest expression of my favorite color would be in the vehicle I drive. However, I've never owned a red vehicle. We recently painted a machine shed barn red, and we have about 4 gallons of leftover paint. Maybe I could have a good use for all that extra color. I'm Grant Nelson, and this is Rural Reflections. Welcome back to the Rural Reflections podcast. Dave Nelson in Carrington, me, Grant Nelson, here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. Dave, I keep an eye on Twitter, several different feeds from farmers from all over the area, Kansas, Iowa, Minnesota, North Dakota. And a lot of them right now are talking about harvest, but of course they're talking about the fun part of harvest, which is eating for the most part. I mean, usually anytime I've been in a truck hauling sugar beets, lunch is usually done by certainly no later than 10:30, and by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm, eating my own fingernails. So field lunches are important when you're out at harvest. Now, back in the good old days, we just have some cookies and a sandwich and some coffee. Nowadays, it's a little bit more elaborate, but I kind of like those old 1970s field lunches.
Yeah, it was fun. Actually, I remember, this would have been a late 50s, I suppose, but field lunch where, you would stop. Everybody would stop making hay and gather around the lunch cart, which was Mom, and there was Kool-Aid in one of those old orange juice, half-gallon orange juice jars or 1-gallon orange juice jars, and coffee, and everybody just kind of sit down on their haunches in the field and take a break and have a cookie and a sandwich and something to drink, and was brought right to the field. And then when everybody was done, it was gathered up, and Mom went home, and everybody in the field went back to work. It was part of how we lived at those times, and since, where these things were more of a social event, or at least as much of a social event as it was something you ate, So you had a chance to talk to people and stuff like that. We're pretty crimped for time for that kind of stuff nowadays.
That's the truth. We didn't have two-way radios or anything like that. So it was partly practical. People would talk to each other. Well, how's it going for you? How is it going over there? Was it wet in that particular area? Did the combine do well taking up those slugs of grain, or how did the baler operate through that area where we didn't rake as opposed to raking the hay? And it was also, like you say, that social aspect and a little break. I think it was good back in that time when you had just a little break, just some time just to go, okay, I don't have to pay attention to anything. I don't have to worry about trying to eat my sandwich while I'm on the run or anything like that. It was a little time where you could just kind of let your brains relax for a bit, socialize, have a little fun. And it was also something nice to look forward to during the long afternoon when it was getting pretty hot and everything. You could say, well, as long as I get through to 3:30 or 4 or something like that, I'll be able to sit underneath the tractor in the shade or sit underneath the pickup or the car and have a sandwich and have who knows what kind of thing we're going to have to drink. I mean, lemonade or water. You always had water out in the field, but you usually had some Kool-Aid or something like that, and it was really a nice thing to look forward to.
It was, and the good part about having your lunch brought to you is you didn't eat it early. You know, you took a lunch with you at noon. It probably wouldn't make it till 3:00.
Never. Just out of boredom, you'd eat it up for sure. And it always tastes better when somebody else made it, especially Mom. She did some awfully good things. And you remember, we didn't even always have insulated carriers for the whatever beverage it was. Sometimes it was just a regular container, but with a towel wrapped around it. And that did pretty well. It
did, yes. And I think old insulated underwear worked good for that too. There was a lot of
That's right.
There was a lot of water jugs that had a wrapping of the. This is not thermal underwear. This is the old heavy knit underwear I'm talking about. But anyway, that was a final resting place for a lot of old worn out long underwear. Was around the water jug.
Yeah, that's right. I do recall that. That was a good, clever use for something that probably wasn't so useful anymore, particularly during the summertime. Let's jump to something else now. Gravity boxes. There's not a lot of people who see tons of them, I'm sure, out in North Dakota because everybody's kind of focused more on trucks, I'm guessing. And we don't have tons of them up here either, but there's still areas where gravity boxes are used pretty often.
Yeah, I've... Actually, if you want to know where they are, just watch the Steffes auctions in Iowa, it's like in Minnesota and that. There'll be farm sales that have 20 of them, on one farm, and it's like, what in the world will people do with them? But actually, they'll put 5 or I don't know how many they'll put together, how many they dare to put together in some of those places, but they'll run a grain train behind the tractor down the road, and I think there's several reasons for it. I'm guessing there's certainly a taxing and licensing part of it, and I've heard it's narrow roads and things like that are part of it, and then it's just a different way of doing things because of the area or the conditions you're in. I mean, here the latest rage is 1,500 to 2,000 bushel grain carts, Well, I don't imagine, a shoulderless road in somewhere rural Iowa, they're looked upon real friendly. So, there's different reasons why they are in different places, but around here, you see it's usually a cattle farmer that has one that's going to get ground feed or, some kind of a thing like that. Corn for feeding and stuff like that you see it because there's hardly any left around here.
I believe that. And when you talk about cattle farmers, I've seen that too, where they'll just use the gravity box as their grain bin, and sometimes they even run it up on blocks of wood so it's a little bit higher so you can easily get a 5-gallon pail under there and just open it up, pull the corn or the corn oats, barley, or whatever you got into there, and then bring it out. I've even seen some people who've built a little roof on top of their gravity box.
Yeah, I have seen that too.
I'll tell you, Dave, it's always good going back in time with you. You got anything else for us before we let you go today?
I guess not. Just as always, we're hoping for decent weather conditions, and at least this year it looks like we are not going to be combining all winter long.
Boy, that sounds good. Well, I'm going to work on some electrical projects this afternoon, so I hope to see you next weekend and do another Rural Reflections podcast, okay?
Well, keep some boards under your feet or something while you're wirings and stay out of the water while you're doing it.
It seems like good advice. Talk to you later, Dave.
Bye.
There he is, my brother Dave. Dave Nelson in Carrington, North Dakota. I'm Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio with another edition of the Rural Reflections Podcast.